Creator, Redeemer, and Sanctifier. Amen.
Amen.
As I said, this feast day is normally the 26th of December, but we rarely hear about it, but a very, very important figure. We know so much about Paul, but do we know about his previous life? Saul of Tarsus, Saul or Saul of Tarsus was his name, and he comes from the southeastern part of the Hittite Empire, which is now Anatolia, which is called Turkey today. And Saul, of course, was one of the greatest persecutors. And then after his conversion, he used that same personality to go out and to build the church. And so whenever you see a symbol of Paul, you might see an actual small little house, which means he's a builder of churches, as opposed to Peter, whom you would see with a pair of keys. Stephen, the first great martyr. Stephen, who was speaking truth to power. Stephen, whose faith, even to the moment of dying amidst a rabid crowd, continued his faith. Most likely, Stephen was actually a Hellenistic Jew. Hellenistic Empire, of course, being the Greek Empire. He was a Gentile at the Hellenistic time. But Hellenistic Greeks had flooded into that area and had intermarried and mingled, and then through the lineage of one's mother, one is continued as a Jew. So he was probably a Hellenistic Jew, with his mother being Jewish. And he's one of the 7 men of good repute, full of the Spirit and of wisdom, who were chosen by the apostles to relieve them of the administrative burden of, quote, serving tables and caring for the widows, end quote. And so by this appointment to assist the apostles, Stephen is the first named of those in the New Testament called the 7, who became the first to do what the church traditionally considers to be the ministry of a deacon. So we have, bishops, deacons, and priests. Priests were the last of those 3 orders. We also have laity, of course, a majority. But deacons were the first. That's why when a person is ordained a priest, one is ordained a deacon first as a transitional deacon. And then I think I always forget if it's the right or the left shoulder. We wear the stole on one of the shoulders. And then when one becomes priest, if one becomes, they wear the stole like this. Now there are people like Bonnie, who is a permanent deacon, who's not a transitional deacon. And the role of deacons is to bring the church to the world and the world to the church. And so many deacons would serve in their ministry, their charism, in either pastoral care or in outreach, primarily. Some are in teaching as well, but mostly either pastoral care or outreach. And it's a very, very important ministry. It's a very essential ministry. Most deacons in our churches today in the diocese around the United States are non-stipendiary, meaning they don't get paid. They do it because they feel called to it. And the difference between a deacon and a priest is something we call ABC. So they can preach and they wear a collar, but the 3 things are A, absolving someone of their sins at the confession, B, blessing, giving a blessing or presiding in a marriage and blessing, although deacons can do marriages at the approval of the bishop, and C, consecration, consecrating the elements at the table. But everything else can be done. And it's a very important ministry. There are many people later in life who have this call that has become known to them by God to carry out the work of a deacon. And in a way, especially in an interim time period, even though lay ministry, of course, is an essential ministry and has been accentuated since the 1979 prayer book, those who go out every weekend to take the sacrament, we're all deacons. We all do the work of the church. We're all priests. We all are able to share in that wonderful work and ministry and gifts of how we continue to build up God's kingdom. A little more about Stephen. It's apparent that his activities involve more than just serving at tables. For the Acts of the Apostles speaks of his preaching and performing many miracles. And these activities led him into conflict with some of the Jews who accused him of blasphemy, which we heard in the story. And they brought him before the Sanhedrin. And his powerful sermon before the council is recorded in Acts chapter 7, which is just after this chapter we had read, because that's Acts 6, chapter 6. And his denunciations of the Sanhedrin so enraged his members that even without a trial, of course, as you heard, they took him out and stoned him. And Saul, who's later Paul, stood by, and he actually consented to the death of Stephen. But Stephen's example is that of steadfast faith in Christ and of his intercession for his persecutors. Very rare. His intercession was for them who betrayed him. And he was to find, and as you know, Jesus found fruit in the mission of Paul later. Great fruit, actually. He's one of the largest builders of churches in the entire Mediterranean. Went on 4 journeys, as you know. And the Christian community in Jerusalem was taking fright at the hostility of the Judean authorities, was scattered after this. And so that for the first time, the gospel of Christ began to spread beyond Jerusalem after this incident. So in our college we said that we give thanks for the example of the first martyr of Stephen, who looked to heaven and prayed for his persecutors. And often on this day we remember still the church throughout the world where it's persecuted. In the Sudan, in Nigeria, in places where some of the rapid spread of Islam has gone and affected the church. We see that, of course, in Pakistan. We see that somewhat right now in Syria with the persecution of Christians and the civil war going on there. So today, may we remember not only about speaking about our faith and being present to it, but also for those around the world who continue to suffer on behalf and faith in Jesus Christ. We're very blessed here where we don't have that in our country, and let us not ever take that for granted. I've always told my students that if you ever go to prison, and God forbid, and come visit you, which I have before to parishioners in the past, not here, Charlotte, they take away your freedom. They tell you when to eat, tell you when to take a shower, tell you when to go outside. But no one can ever take away one's faith. And so let us not take that for granted, because that is something that we always have. It is a private thing, a personal thing. And there are many people around the world today who still continue to lose their life for their faith in Christ.